And in my psychology training, my clinical training, I was taught anxiety is a disease, anxiety is a disorder. There's something wrong with you if you feel this way. And, over the pandemic, I realized that that's just not true. In the context of stress, you are going to feel anxious.
Hello, and thank you for calling the Higher Self Hotline, your direct line to the divine. You've been led here by your inner knowing, and you've arrived right on cue. I'm your host, Zoey Greco, and together we'll make the ethereal earthly, helping you consciously embody your spiritual knowing and most authentic self. Please listen carefully to the following options. To discover how to fulfill your soul's purpose, press 1. To unlock infinite abundance in life, love, and career, press 2. To heal your mind, body, and spirit, press 3. To speak with your personal spirit guides, press 0. Please hold while we connect you to your highest timeline. Hello, Divine Darlings, and welcome back to the Higher Self Hotline. I'm your host, Zoey Greco. Thank you so much for joining me today. Our guest today is someone that I have only recently become aware of. Well, by the time you hear this, I will actually be probably a longtime fan. However, I am a person, as you guys have heard and allowed me to share with you, I'm a person that lives with anxiety. And as I have worked with thousands of clients all over the world who also struggle with anxiety, I thought maybe this is a discussion we should have on a larger scale. So I have invited Dr. David Rosmarin to join us on the podcast today. Dr. Rosmarin is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School, a program director at McLean Hospital, and founder of Center for Anxiety. Through his work as a clinical psychologist, scientist, educator, author, and keynote speaker, check out his TED Talks, David has helped thousands of individuals and organizations to thrive by embracing the emotion of anxiety. His clinical work and research have been featured in Good Morning America, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, and of course, TED. Dr. Rosmarin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. What an awesome opportunity.
Well, I would love to start, as I start with all guests, by kind of getting a little bit of an idea of what brought you to where you are today. I think specializing in anxiety is kind of unique and feels more contemporary as a focus in psychology, which I could be totally wrong about. But I'm curious, what brought you to this place in this moment?
But being honest, it was my own anxiety. I don't think I would have recognized that or admitted it until about 5 years ago.
Wow.
When I was in college, I was anxious and worried and had trouble sleeping at some points and really trying to figure out what the next steps were I was going to have in my life. And the next thing you know, I ended up in psychology. And then all of a sudden, 5 years later, I'm specializing in anxiety. And, I only realized recently, that there was a red thread all along. And it's an emotion that we all experience, myself included. And here I am.
The thing that I really adore about your particular method of working with people and guiding people is the way that you support people in embracing anxiety. I think all emotions are teachers. They all have something to offer and to share. And that's from more of, I suppose, like a spiritual or emotional perspective than a psychological one. But they're signifiers that there's something deeper happening. So rather than stuffing them down or putting them away, working with them feels like it really is the answer. And your work focuses on empowering individuals and organizations to embrace it. So could you explain what initially drew you to what feels like a little bit of a counterintuitive approach to anxiety?
You hit it. You hit on it very, very clearly. Spiritual versus a psychological approach to this. And in my psychology training, my clinical training, I was taught anxiety is a disease, anxiety is a disorder. There's something wrong with you if you feel this way. And, over the pandemic, I realized that that's just not true. In the context of stress, you are going to feel anxious. When people are pursuing something of value in their lives, they're going to feel heart palpitations. You're going to have your stomach in knots. When you're pursuing a new relationship, if you're having kids, if you're, pursuing a dream, if you're being an entrepreneur, like all of these, or in a situation, I mentioned COVID, in a situation where things are difficult, having those emotions is actually not an indication that something is wrong. It's actually an indication that something is right. That experience really turned everything on its head for me over the last several years.
You know, you're kind of reminding me of this quote that my listeners have heard me say a million times, and I probably always get it wrong, but one of my favorite quotes by Pema Chodron is, fear is a natural reaction of moving closer to the truth. And I think a lot of times, especially because I work with people on an intuitive level, right? Like I'm teaching them how to listen to that inner voice. People have a difficult time differentiating between a voice of like fear or anxiety versus an intuitive sense that something is misaligned or out of alignment. And I know that we often are taught to really experience anxiety as a negative thing or something to eliminate, as you've called it, a disease or a disorder. So could you help us understand the paradigm shift of actually embracing anxiety? What does that look like in practice when we really begin the process of embracing it as a part of ourselves?
Well, first, I do want to validate and acknowledge that at a certain point, anxiety does become an interfering force in one's life. Like,
yes.
Can't go to work, can't function in our relationships, can't do certain things. And, I do want to give credence to that and to honor that for many people, anxiety is a problem that does require a clinical intervention, maybe even a pharmacological intervention. But there's not a fundamental difference between that and ordinary, regular experience of anxiety that all human beings experience. Really, it's a grayscale. And at a certain point, we might need something more. But the emotion in of itself is not a flaw. It's not an indication that something is wrong. It's an indication that you're alive. The only people I know who have no anxiety at all are dead.
Yes.
So it's really a sign that something's going well.
Yes.
Although, admittedly, at a certain point, we might need more interventions in order to do that, and we might need to try to tamp it down. But for most people, the anxiety that we experience is normal, healthy, an indication that it helps us to stay on our game. It helps us to interact with people, to be more aware socially of what is and isn't appropriate. It's a motivating force, and it can also help us to connect very deeply with other people.
Tell me a little bit more about that. How is anxiety a connector?
Well, let me ask you, when you've spoken about your own anxiety with others, what does it do for your level of connection and closeness with that person?
It's vulnerability. The vulnerability. Yes, absolutely. It's so funny. When I asked the question, I was like, hold on a second. And as soon as you posed it that way, I thought, oh yeah, that's so true. Anytime you're willing to be vulnerable with someone and share something that's more deeply happening with you, it kind of brings these walls down. It creates a softening in that experience.
Yes. And it can, not only does it create a softening, it creates an instant closeness. If you can get if it's with someone who's going to validate you and be with you. But if you can, having a raw emotional experience in the context of anxiety it creates bond. It creates bonding with other people, where you're standing there and you're vulnerable and you're feeling all these things and you actually express it and you're putting yourself out there. And then what's going to happen? And if you're held in those moments, the bond can last forever.
I love that. I'm curious, as we kind of work toward embracing this emotion, working with it, what are some of the ways that we can shift our mindset or shift our relationship to anxiety? I know you have a bit of a process. I'm curious if you can share that with us.
Sure. So I had a TEDx Nashville talk this last summer, which was terrifying to give.
Were you anxious?
Oh my God. Anxious is not the word. Oh my God. I was like, oh my God, am I really going to do this? And I was speaking about my own anxiety for the first time, and in many ways in public and like a huge audience. I was like, okay, let's just do this. And it was great. It was great. It was a great experience. So I'll tell you the 4 steps that
Please, yeah.
There. The first is to identify what it is that you are afraid of. And it's not an inconsequential thing to actually take the time and think it through. To go for a walk and to let yourself really focus on what it is that makes you anxious. And it's not such a simple thing. I have currently a client who I'm working with. I have very few clients who I'm working with, but this one person I decided to take on for various reasons, who has a fear of flying. He's not afraid of the plane crashing, and he's not afraid of being away from his family. And he's not even afraid of feeling anxious. He's afraid of the consequences of feeling anxious. I said, well, what's that about? And it took 2 or 3 conversations to really probe and get to the depth of it, that when he feels anxious, he feels as if something is fundamentally weak inside of him.
Wow.
So facing his fear by going on a plane, which is going to be the 3rd step that we'll get to, is actually an act of showing or testing out, evaluating, do I have what it takes to be able to function in this world? The plane is not just the plane, and it's not just crashing, and it's not a simple thing. It's actually an aspect of his identity as a person. So we spend a lot of time just identifying what it is, and that's why I encourage people to do. Identify. What is it that you really, 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 really are afraid of at a fundamental level? That's step 1.
Tell us more. So take us into step 2, please. Yeah.
Make you anxious. Step 2 is to share, talk about it with someone else. And we spoke about the vulnerability and the connection, and part of it is that, and another part of it is that when we talk about our anxiety, it makes it it just takes so much of the tension out. It's like, if you're sharing with someone who's psychologically minded anyway, it's going to be like, yeah, of course you feel that way. That makes sense. And like, those words are just such a relief. Like, I'm not crazy. Like, this is okay. And it's a bonding, connecting point. So sharing it with someone else, and that could be a loved one, it could be a therapist, it could be a total stranger.
I think for me, the sharing is something that I've been trying to master in my life, not with just anxiety, but with the bigger emotions that I feel as an intuitive person, as an empathetic person, and as just a highly emotional and emotionally intelligent person. I'm constantly holding a lot of emotion and big emotions. And so I've found in recent years, creating spaces for myself to share really helps to alleviate the shame that I feel around the emotions, which tends to add this other layer of density to those emotions. So from my own personal experience, the identification, I think, is sometimes harder, like going into those, having those deeper questions and asking yourself those conversations, or having those conversations with yourself, asking those deeper questions, isn't something that everyone is taught to do. And even when we get to like, oh, okay, I'm anxious, typically that's where I think people stop. They're like, oh, anxiety, that's the answer, is I'm anxious. But to encourage people to take it one step deeper, to identify the real like root cause of the anxiety, then providing them with kind of this encouragement to speak on not just the feeling of anxiety, right? But like the deeper reasons behind the anxiety, which is where I think the real shame sits. It just is so enlightening. And by that, I mean, literally makes you lighter. The density tends to begin to alleviate through literally just speaking it out, like moving it out of my body is really the experience that I have this is the testimony I bear to say that this has really worked for me as well.
Thank you. And it's so true. Sometimes one of the people I was working with recently said it's like going into a cave and shining a light on these deep areas that you don't ever want to go to. Yeah. And it's terrifying, and it's, like you said, embarrassing and shaming to go there. But once you actually shine the light on it and then share it with someone else, invite someone else into that place with you, actually unearth it and discover it and be okay with it, it just takes, like you said, like so much of the tension just gets reduced because the shame goes away, and you're not afraid of the unknown. You're afraid of something that you know of. So those are the first 2 steps. I
would love to ask actually another question around this, just because I'm curious. As someone who I've spent the last nearly 4 years now in just consistent active therapy for the first time in my life as an adult, and doing a lot of what in the spiritual community we would call like shadow work, going in and finding these places that have been sort of ostracized within myself or sequestered, that have been pushed away. And this metaphor that you use, that your client brought up, this idea of, going into a cave and finding these hidden things. I'm curious if sometimes you experience that people struggle to go into the cave, or like how do you support people in their willingness to do that work? Because I think at least for me, the thing that hung me up for so long was I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to discover what was in there. Now, once you do, as you know, it's never as bad as you think. Like you think there's monsters hiding in the dark, but really it's like your frightened inner child, or like, your fear of public speaking because you were laughed at or whatever. These like little things that we don't realize plant themselves so deeply in our psyche. But how do you support people? Because the first two steps are actually really hard. They're important, they matter, but they're complicated, at least in my experience. So I'm curious how you support people in the willingness to ask the questions and investigate more deeply, and then the willingness to take it a step further and actually speak it out to other people.
I think you're making a very good intuitive point, which is that, to some extent, it's always going to be difficult to identify really what's at the root of it. Yeah. You mentioned you had a very interesting language before. You said one step further. Not just anxiety, but one step further. In some ways, you could always go one step further. Like there's something in that subconscious level, something deeper in the cave, something else, another nook, another cranny, another stone under which there's some cobweb or scary, burning your idea from the past. I don't know if we have to unearth everything. And I think if you're doing like intensive therapy for multiple years and an adult stage as an intuitive human being who's psychologically minded, you're shining a lot of light in a lot of different places, and it is going to be
sometimes too much.
Yeah, it is too much sometimes, and I think that's normal and healthy and fine. My sense is that as long as people are on the road to identifying as opposed to avoiding, as opposed to shunting off, as opposed to this is a disease, this is a problem I have to get rid of it right away. Like the default in American society anyway is when we feel anxious, immediately medicate away the problem. This is a disease. I shouldn't be feeling this way. Something's wrong. As opposed to, here's my opportunity to identify what's at the root of it for me and to really make peace with that, share it with others, create connection, and then go on to other steps. I think that the framing of it as a value to use anxiety in a constructive way is the best motivator that there is.
Yes.
And it's not something that we're teaching kids. It's not something that we're teaching clients or patients. It's certainly not something that, college students are learning how to do. So to me, like at a macro level, simply seeing anxiety as a normal process and something that could add value to your life if you discover it, share it, and then use it that's the framework. That's ultimately the framework.
Thank you so much for going one step further on that with me. Because you could probably tell I'm a bit of a curious person. And especially from doing my own personal work over the years and wanting to really guide others effectively, being able to pick the brain of an expert is something that I just relish. So this is like absolutely thrilling for me. But before I digress, I would love to take us into step 3, if you wouldn't mind, because I think we're only halfway there.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess so. Although the first was the hardest. Step 3 is to embrace. And embrace is facing your fears, doing something that makes you anxious, uncomfortable, intentionally, purposefully, going back to that step 1 and saying, like, what am I truly afraid of? And actually doing it. I'll tell you where I got this from is in terms of building resilience. How do you build physical fitness?
I mean, yeah, you have to literally wound, stress the muscle over and over and over again until it builds upon itself.
Yeah. It's interesting, wound. It's more like there is a breaking down of tissue.
Right.
It comes back. It's not quite a wound, but it is, in some ways it could be at a molecular level, certainly like, your capillaries, like there's a breaking down of tissue that ends up getting rebuilt stronger. And the same thing happens at a cardiovascular level, whether it's muscle, body composition. And you sort of take it for granted in the physical world that you have to push against stress in order to build strength. But when it comes to mental and emotional health, where's the discussion about that you have to push against something that's mentally hard in order to build mental fortitude? We don't talk about that. I wish that in every school in America, kids were encouraged to do something that's safe but uncomfortable once a week.
Yes.
It'd be a different society.
Oh, I mean, even as an entrepreneur, I've been doing this for 10 years, as I shared with you, and I'm at a level of growth where I'm ready to break into something bigger and just different. And I'm having all these emotions surging and coming up, right? Like the anxieties, the fears, the doubts. And at first I was like, excuse me, we've done that. Like I've worked through this. I did this, not realizing that every time that you are ready to grow or change, there will inevitably be some internal pushback from your ego in the form of anxiety, from what have you. And as I look back, I realize like, oh man, I basically go through this every 2 years. Like every 2 years, I go into the cycle where I'm ready to do something else. My internal system goes alert, alert. And I'm like, why are we freaking out? I just want to try one new thing, because you have to habituate yourself to meeting those emotions and those feelings. So you're right. If we were teaching people from an early age, if we were teaching children that level of emotional resilience, adults you and I wouldn't have anyone to work with, because they would, they would feel confident. And I think what that does is build self-trust and self-confidence, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but feels like a pretty strong antidote to anxiety is the feeling that, you can trust yourself in that situation.
And I know that I can do this even though it's hard. And the fact that it's hard and the fact that I feel uncomfortable doesn't mean that I shouldn't be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if anything, it's actually an opportunity for me to build that muscle that I need in order to crest over life's hurdles with grace. That's exactly what this is.
Wow.
So a couple of weeks ago, I took my own advice, and it was terrifying. I held a boa constrictor.
I saw this on your Instagram. You looked really happy. Like the smile on your face, it says a lot.
Yeah, I was smiling. It was more like sort of channeling my anxiety into excitement. And by the way, anxiety and excitement have the exact same neurobiological profile.
Wait, I'm so sorry. Can I just tell you this? So I experience I have synesthesia, basically. So I experience emotion as like color and frequency. And I have always said, and if you're a podcast listener of a long time, you've heard me say this. I've always said anxiety and excitement are like opposite ends of a spectrum. Like they're on the same line, they're on the same wavelength, and they're the same color. They're both yellow to me. So the fact that you just said that, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Science says I'm right. Like, okay, we love that.
They're both mediated by adrenaline. The amygdala is involved in both. So at a neurobiological and a neurophysiological level, they're the same. But even the symptoms are the same. Like if you're on a roller coaster, what happens to your stomach?
Yep.
What happens to your breathing? What happens to your level? What happens to your heart rate? What happens to your palms? You're sweating. You feel a little bit tense, but you lean into it and you're like, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is really step 4.
Okay, take us there.
So, but yeah, the smile on my face was definitely like leaning into it and letting go, which is number 4. But number 3 is embracing it and actually doing things that intentionally make you anxious.
You already are intuitive. You just don't know how to access your power. But don't worry, I'm here to help. The Intuition Activation Mentorship is back by popular demand one last time. I mean it. This is really the last time I will be offering this program. And if you want exclusive early access, a $500 discount, and a free private reading with me, you'll need to join the waitlist before September 12th. This transformative 30-day program is designed to rewire your mind for intuitive clarity, helping you move past fear and self-doubt so you can step into total trust in your inner knowing. Using a powerful fusion of mind hacking techniques, neuroplasticity, positive psychology, and universal energy laws, this mentorship will expand your psychic abilities and give you the tools to confidently receive divine guidance. But what's inside the mentorship? 10 in-depth lectures on intuition, the science of neuroplasticity and mind hacking, and how to differentiate between ego and higher self. Daily intuitive activation exercises to flex and strengthen your spiritual gifts, deep soul-level connections through community experiences and practice exercises, 5 live group calls where I will personally guide you through everything I know about oracle cards, pendulum work, aura reading, spiritual self-care, and more. And of course, 24/7 access to me for the duration of the program. Only 5 early bird spots are available, and first dibs goes to the waitlist. The waitlist closes September 12th, so if you're ready to unlock your highest potential, sign up now at zoegreco.com/IAM. That's zoegreco.com/IAM. I cannot wait to see you in class. You know, this one I find particularly interesting because I think from a spiritual perspective, when we talk about like embracing emotion, it's very much in that like almost like the parts therapy where you like converse with it, you meet with it. But this is like exposure therapy. Like when you're talking about embracing it, you're like embrace it in the material, in your experience. And I think that is perhaps even more challenging. At least I'm an intellectualizer. So I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. I'll go talk to my emotions all day long. But if you're like, cool, now go do the thing you're scared of. Ooh, that's a little different. Yeah. So what is your like, what would be your number one tip to someone that is ready for step 3, but is struggling to actually take the action step?
Great. Firstly, I think we all are ready for step 3 in some level because
yes, we are.
You do stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable on a regular basis. You might not do it all the time, but you're not completely running from discomfort all the time. You get out of bed, even though if you're not feeling great. You go to work, you continue with a conversation, even though you're having awkward moments. We're not completely, you continue to complete a workout, even though it's physiologically taxing, even though you're not feeling it. There are hundreds of examples. So I think we all do this to some degree. The only question is when it comes to anxiety, are we using the same approach? And we've been taught to fear anxiety, that something is wrong with us or that something will go wrong if we continue to face it. Right?
Absolutely.
People think like if I actually do that, then my brain will explode. I'm not going to be able to handle it. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to, lose control of my bladder. Like who knows? Yeah. That doesn't usually happen. People don't usually faint or go crazy or like that doesn't occur. So facing the anxiety really builds that self-efficacy and self-confidence, as you put it, beforehand. So that to me is the number one motivator, to know that you can and you do this, and it's just not having done this one specific exercise yet.
Wow. I actually love that. What an encouraging way to consider that you already are capable. You prove it to yourself all the time in ways that you might not be aware of, but to bring that awareness forward is extremely empowering. I love that.
It's just the next step in your journey. And if you're dealing with anxiety, it's then there are plenty of opportunities to, be able to do it. So count yourself lucky. But yeah, do something that makes you super anxious and like relish in it. By the way, don't do a 10 out of 10. Like I like to say anxiety actually goes on a 1 to 9 scale. Nobody has a 0, and a 10 is like ridiculous. So let's not go there. So we have 1, 2, 3 is low, 4, 5, 6 is medium, and then 7, 8, 9 is high. When I encourage people to do something that makes them feel anxious, a 4 or a 5 or maybe a 6 is where we want to go. That's the sweet spot.
Okay. So you hear that, guys? Don't go crazy now, but do something challenging.
It doesn't have to be an 8 or 9. I mean, it could be, but I don't recommend that without like a professional or someone who's coaching you along, or without other circumstances in place. But yeah, 6. That's like the highest that I would recommend. And you mentioned habituation. The more you do it over time, in 2 weeks, that 6, it's going to be a 4.
Yeah. Wow.
9 is going to be a 7. So you can actually move along, just like you do in physical fitness.
And I think that's important to say too, is that it doesn't, because I think even my brain with a fully developed frontal lobe, thought to myself that if I do a 6, then it becomes a 0, and not necessarily. And I think a good example of this in my life and experience is over the last year, I've had to fire pretty much everyone on my team and like rebuild it into new. And there's nothing that gives me more anxiety as a people pleaser and a lover girl than firing people. It's the worst. I'd rather jump off a cliff. So the idea that I've had to like do that over and over and over again, you're right. It's not a 0, but now it's not a 10 the way it used to be for me. It's definitely alleviated itself. So that is such a powerful distinction. Thank you for sharing that. Take us there. Take us into 4.
Yeah. The thing is, I can't take you there because you have to take yourself.
I don't know why I was surprised by that. That really got me.
Really, all of them you have to take yourself. But this one especially, like this is one where a person in their heart and in their soul, it's called letting go. And it's acknowledging that there are limits to our control. There are limits to what we can know. There's only so much that you can do. And at the end of the day, you're human, and like embracing that and accepting it. And when we do that, then anxiety becomes actually something that can enrich our lives. Because when we feel anxious, I mentioned anxiety versus excitement before. There's only one difference between the two, fundamentally.
The way you think about it?
Yeah. When you're anxious, you're like, I don't want to feel this. I'm trying to have control. I'm trying to stop it. Please block it out. Just end it, finish it, like protect myself, like do anything except I don't want to feel this. As opposed to excitement, where you're like, bring it on, but it's the same physiology. The only difference is that do you lean into it and actually say, like, I'm here.
Wow. So I happen to know that you're actually offering workshops regarding this process and taking people into this more actionably and deeply. Can you tell us a little bit about your workshops?
Sure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we had our first round of workshops, which was really awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Taking people through each of these 4 steps, and we did 1 hour on each. But going forward, it looks like I'm putting together a asynchronous course. So it's going to be more these 4 modules, and like the 4-step process is I'm getting a lot of traction with it. Like people resonating with it. It's a lot of people are saying that they're just in a different place with their anxiety, and they're not trying to get rid of it. They're actually learning how to use it in a constructive, positive way, which is so much better. So identify, share, embrace, let go. And we're having multiple, those are the 4 modules, and then multiple sessions on each.
Wow.
Up, and it's an exciting time.
Well, we'll definitely provide links to that in the show notes for anyone that's interested. And then at the end of the episode, I'm going to ask you where everyone can connect and listen, but we don't want to let them know just yet because we have more to talk about. So, I'm really curious. So you founded the Center for Anxiety and you work at Harvard Medical School and McLean Hospital. I mean, you're a founded like scientist and researcher. And I'm curious, based on your research, how our cultural understanding of anxiety has evolved in the last decade. And honestly, it sounds like for you, it's evolved a lot within the last 5 years, just since our experience with COVID. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about what your research is sort of revealing about anxiety that we didn't know before, or we might not have believed to be true.
Sure. I'll give you a couple macro level trends in the research, which I think really tell just a large story from a 90,000 feet or whatever, 50 sort of level as to what's going down. So everybody knows that there's an anxiety epidemic today, and it's especially among young individuals, teenagers, and young adults. One of the best predictors of less anxiety is older age in our society. Yeah. Older adults have less anxiety than younger adults. It's just the way it is. But interestingly, there are a couple of other trends. In low and medium income countries, low and middle income countries, they have half and a quarter, I should say, middle income countries have half as much anxiety as high income countries. And low income countries have half as much anxiety as middle income countries. And it's not because of identification, because if you look at suicide levels, if you look at self-injury, if you look at people going on disability, those are all in lockstep in accordance. So if you sort of take those 2 pieces of data, firstly on age, and then secondly, with regards to income, I'll throw one more piece out, which is that we found this in our clinic, that during the pandemic, patients who had come in for therapy prior to March 2020, throughout the rest of the pandemic, actually did not have an increase in anxiety at all.
Wow.
The highest risk individuals who had pre-existing anxiety disorders, as long as they were getting some sort of treatment, they were actually faring better than almost everybody else.
Wow.
In society. So stitching together these 3 pieces of information, and I have more, which I've spoken about in other talks, including a TEDx Reno talk.
I've watched that one as well.
Yeah, so that has a little more data than the Nashville one. I sort of like bared my soul, but the other one, it was sort of like a little more nerdy. What I think is going on is this. I'll give you a little bit more information. Take a look at Jonathan Haidt's work, The Anxious Generation. He makes a number of really important points, but one of them is that our culture is obsessed with safety. I was going on a run the other day here in Boston, and there's a mom and her friend, and then two kids, and one of the kids walked maybe 2 feet away, and like the mom's like freaking out, like, come on, don't go. And I'm like, what are you afraid is going to happen? We're on a walking route. It's 12 feet wide. Like, it's okay. Like, let your kid be a kid. But we're so sort of obsessed with that. I think in our culture, in high income countries, and younger individuals and parents of younger individuals, there's this tendency to protect at all costs. Like, we don't want to fail. We don't want to feel bad. We don't want to struggle. We don't want to have a problem. Older adults in our society, they lived through the 20th century, 2 world wars, like Vietnam.
Yeah.
They lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, which literally almost wiped the entire planet into nothing.
The Cold War, which is constant anxiety and fear about what if.
I mean, comparably, the 21st century, I'm not saying it's been easy, but we are so enervated by difficulties today that in previous generations, it would have been like, okay. And in lower income countries, people have a lot more to worry about than in high income countries.
Yeah.
A warlord coming in and taking your village, or not having drinking water. Yet rates of anxiety are substantially lower. So I think at a macro level, what and then back to my patients. So the patients who one of the main messages that we tell clients, all forms of therapy do this, is that anxiety is a part of the landscape of your life, and this is okay. We reset the balance. We reset the expectation. Like, you're going to feel anxious, and that doesn't mean something's wrong with you. So at a macro level, what's really going on? We've become allergic to anxiety. And in concert with our allergy for anxiety, we are seeing the highest levels of anxiety in human history.
I mean, it sounds like it's really in the resistance. Like, the suffering is in the resistance of experiencing this emotion or this vibration, whatever you want to call it. But it also makes me think about like our more primal ancestors, like what anxiety, the purpose that anxiety served. And now it sounds like what you're saying is we perceive so much of life as a threat to our sense of safety, security, certainty, that we're inundated by that emotion. Like, we don't have the ability to identify what actually might be worth being anxious about.
It's exactly what's going on. What used to be fear, like, you'd have to have a saber-toothed tiger like chasing you down.
Yes.
Like an actual real threat, not walking 2 feet away from mom. That's not.
Well, I mean, in that example, that's really interesting, because I don't know that the child was actually anxious about being 2 feet away from mom, right? Like, that didn't create anxiety for the child, but that's what happens to us, right? Is someone tells us, don't go over there, don't get away from me. And then we learn to become anxious about the things that we weren't previously anxious about.
Correct. Because we are obsessed with control. We are obsessed with control. And like you said, and we always want to be in control, as opposed to only having anxiety, or as opposed to having high levels of anxiety when we really need it, which is in serious situations of actual physical threat. And that's ultimately for.
I would love to discuss this with you, because obviously the work that I do is spiritual. The kind of content of this podcast is spiritual. And I happen to know that you yourself are a person who's fairly spiritual. So, in many traditions, spiritual traditions, they have approaches for dealing with difficult emotions like anxiety or other, I think there's like 5 emotions that as human beings we're psychologically resistant to, like fear, anger. There's a couple. You probably would know this better than I would. But how does your research at like the spirituality and mental health program connect traditional spiritual wisdom with modern psychological science? I'm curious about that.
So spirituality and mental health, I could speak for 5 hours on that. I'm keeping specific on anxiety. I think if you take a spiritual approach to mental health, it's very different than a biomedical approach to mental health, which seeks to identify all aspects of human suffering as a disease. I don't see it as a disease. I don't even see addiction as a disease. There's a reason why people get into bad patterns. I'm not saying it's adaptive and healthy to be addicted. Right. substances, and I'm not saying that at all, but there's a reason why. Do they feel disconnected from people in their community? Do they feel disconnected from their loved ones? Are they trying to reach them, or are they trying to communicate in some way? Do they feel so isolated and alone that the only way they can handle it is through really anesthetizing themselves through the use of substances? And I think, we often pathologize it like, oh, that's addiction, like that's a problem. We have to sort of medicate it away, as opposed to understanding the underlying phenomenon that's giving way to it, which is very human. And we can play that game with anxiety, with depression, with anything. When it comes to anxiety, like I mentioned before, when people are under stress, when people have goals in life, when people are starting a new relationship, how terrifying is it to start a new relationship?
Oh, I can't even. I tried everything. I've been married for 8 years. I've been with my husband for 11 years. And for the first 2 years, I tried everything I could to get him to break up with me, because I was so afraid of being so in love, like so afraid of meeting someone that could change my life to that degree. It's terrifying. Love is terrifying.
It's terrifying. Of course it is, because now, like, you actually mean something to somebody.
Yes.
And now your choices matter. And now what they do could affect you. And the more vulnerable you become, the more that person's choices on a day-to-day basis that you have no control over, very little, are going to impact your emotional state. And the more you're sort of yoked to them and connected with them, this is starting to sound very terrifying.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not a pathology. That's human. That's wonderful. That's, what we call it? There's a very sophisticated term for everything I've been speaking about right there.
Tell us.
Love. And isn't that like normal and healthy and wonderful? Or you can say, no, that's a disease. That's a problem. You shouldn't be feeling that way. Medicate it. And like, get rid of it. And by the way, I'm not against medication at all. Like, more than 50% of our patients at Center for Anxiety are on medication, and probably another 10% should be. To be perfectly honest. But the purpose isn't to get rid of the anxiety. The purpose is to get it to a state that you can manage it and you can deal with it, not to get rid of it, not to annihilate it. So yeah, that's what I think. In terms of having a spiritual approach, it's very, I think it's very empowering, as opposed to setting up an expectation to try to get rid of all distressing emotions and looking at them as a disease, which is just not helpful.
I think for me personally, having spirituality in my life has supported me in being able to navigate my anxiety, because I do believe that there is a purpose that flows through life. And when I'm asked to do something that creates anxiety in me, like from when there's an internal asking, like an inner calling to do something, I feel on some level certain that it will be okay, even if it's a hard, like the embracing is difficult, but I know that on the other side of embracing it is a gift, or like a reward, or like a deeper experience of life, a deeper experience of humanity, a deeper experience of myself that I personally can't live without. And because I believe that it's like divinely designed, I feel safe to like kind of surrender to it. And even in religions that, or I should say even in religion, which I'm not technically a part of, I see a lot of language around like surrendering to this like greater power. And I do see a lot of like, let go, let God kind of mentality, which I think can be supportive, but also I wonder how it actually affects people to like surrender that much power to something beyond themselves. Like, it's something that even in my life as a spiritual person, I continue to like question and navigate and explore. And I think each person's experience of it is a little bit different, but I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
I'll tell you about an experience I had that it's reminding.
Please.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I gave a talk at Harvard College, and I had these like, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, super brilliant, students. And they're studying physics and foreign policy and, of course, psychology and philosophy and, foreign languages, like you name it, like really, a really just very diverse crew. And I started my talk a little bit too intense. It was too much. It was too intense for them in retrospect. But I asked them the following questions. I said, who in this room chose when, whether, or where to be born? And how many of the factors in your life have you truly been in charge of that shaped who you are, like your socioeconomic status, or your race, or your gender, or what year of history you were born into, or who your friends were growing up, or your IQ? And like, I just listed off about 20 different things, and they looked at me completely dumbfounded. It was silence. like an awkward, uncomfortable silence in the room. And I'm like, on the one hand, I'm like, I just silenced a group of Harvard students. Like, this is amazing. But
You
then
found their kryptonite.
I did, but then I realized like the kryptonite was actually deadly to them. They couldn't handle being out of control. They couldn't handle acknowledging the limits of their control.
Yeah.
Handle acknowledging the limits of their control. And I felt so scared when I left that room that like, what are they going to do when life happens?
Oof.
When they can't get what they need? When the economy changes, when foreign policy changes, when $9.2 billion of federal funding gets yanked out, like what's going to happen? And I think there's something very empowering by recognizing the limits of our control. All spiritual and religious traditions encourage people to do that. It's very healthy.
This is a funny fact I've never shared on the podcast, but I grew up on the East Coast. I went to a private boarding school and I was encouraged to apply to Harvard. I was accepted to Harvard. I chose not to go to Harvard. No offense, because I had already been in that really high pressure, like private boarding school on the East Coast is very much like a microcosmic, Ivy League university. We're all expected to perform at a certain level, achieve to a certain degree, present ourselves in a certain way. And just thinking about that room of students and how I could have been one of those students really strikes me that my internal system said, I don't want that. And I don't want to feel that pressure, because how many of those students had, some sort of familial pressure or societal pressure, or like it's seen as such like a beacon. It's like this thing to like aspire to in all ways. And when you attain it, I think it's even more pressure because now you're holding this very precious and immense thing. And you're right. Like the greatest minds, in our society entering into this space, there's so much pressure they're already holding just by getting there. So to kind of show them, how many choices did you actually make that brought you into this room could be really destabilizing to these young people who they're just happy they got there. And now to think, do I even want to be here? Like just all these questions. So I think that's a really amazing experience to have had, and awareness for you. Like what amazing research you're able to do just by having conversations or like speaking to a room of students in that environment.
Definitely telling. I love your story. I'll share one of my own. When I joined the faculty, I felt that immense pressure to produce, to publish, and I was falling into it. And I did. I published. I like just morning, noon, and night. I remember I was starting my office in New York, and I remember one day my flight was delayed from 11 p.m. till 1 a.m. And I was thrilled because I was able to finish a grant application sitting in the airport lounge. Like it was 80 hours plus 80, 90 hours a week, like just completely gunning it and doing whatever I possibly could to get ahead. And like at some point I went to one of my spiritual mentors here, religious mentors here, actually in town, Rabbi Naftali Beer, a wonderful, wonderful local resource. And I said, I'm really kind of buckling here. What do I do? And he said, do you have a curriculum vitae? I said, of course I have a curriculum vitae. Like I'm up for assistant professorship next month. He said, I want you to look at it, but I want you to look at it differently. Currently, the way you look at it is you need to publish more. I want you to now look at it and look at what you've published. Stop trying to do more and to ask yourself, like, if you never published again, would that be enough? From that moment on, I haven't had a shred of anxiety about my academic career.
That makes me want to cry, actually. I mean, it's not uncommon for me to want to cry, but that really touches my heart, because I think we're so habituated into this idea of reaching for more and more and more. And even in my own like journey of wanting to know myself more deeply, I'm so passionate about it, because the more experience I have in life, the more emotions I've experienced, the more vibrations that have moved through me, I'm able to serve others more. And sometimes, when I'm getting down on myself, people around me are like, just read some reviews. Like, just look at how many sessions you've had. Like, just take a fucking breath, like relax. And the feeling that gives me is so relieving. But it's a little bit fleeting. It's a little bit momentary. I haven't quite repatterned. So what you're saying is actually really inspiring to me personally.
Thank you. Yeah. I think ironically, we become a lot stronger as human beings when we relinquish that control, but it's terrifying to let go.
I love the way that you are truly living the teachings that you share. Like for you to have to share your own vulnerable story, to say, yeah, as a Harvard professor, I got there and thought, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this to some degree. Like, can I keep up? Can I make it happen? Because again, just like your students were experiencing, you're in this upper echelon of, the elite, the best of the best. And what will keep you there? Is it precarious at the top of the mountain? Like, it's it's not enough to just get there sometimes. And I think that shows us just how unattainable and unrealistic things are.
Sometimes the more we get, the worse it is.
Well, I definitely want to be respectful of your time. I know that we're approaching the end of our time together. So I would love to ask 2 final questions. We'll do a little bit of a rapid fire. So the first would be, for someone listening who is experiencing debilitating levels of anxiety, what would be the first step that you would guide them in embracing it rather than fighting against it? Obviously, it would probably be, the identification, but how do we move from I'm uncomfortable to I know what I'm feeling? Like, what would be the first thing that you would guide them to do?
If someone's having debilitating levels of anxiety, that's clinical and you're going to need some professional help. I'm not saying you can't also benefit from learning how to use it as a strength in your life. And it's important to get there. But the first thing is to sort of learn basic tools to manage it in order that it's not debilitating and not getting in the way of your day-to-day. Like if you can't go to work, can't function, you can't have relationships because of this, you can't complete your semester at college or whatever it is, then we're talking something that's clinical. I'm not saying it's fundamentally different. It's still spectrum, but nevertheless, the technologies that we're going to be using are going to be more clinical as opposed to what we've been speaking about today.
I think that's such an important step to mention and something that, as a psychologist yourself, obviously you're like, yeah, talk to someone, get some help. But for the rest of the world, it seems like such a less obvious first step. I think for a lot of people, they put it at the bottom of their list. They're like, I'm going to try 1,000 things before I go and get help, before I ask someone for support. So I think the fact that you said, bring it to the top, don't do this by yourself, is just such a game changer and so powerful in itself. To you, it might feel quite commonplace, but I think for the people listening, it will be like, oh yeah, wait, I'm allowed to ask for help. So I think that's beautiful. And then last but not least, Dr. David Rosmarin, where can we learn more about you? Where can we receive some of your wisdom, read some of the things you've published, watch your TED Talks? Like, how can we continue to learn with and learn from and connect with you?
Thank you. Best place is my website, DHROSMARIN.com, and various social media outlets as well. But I love engaging with people. I love hearing from your audience, any audience, about what they thought of this conversation. So don't hesitate to reach out personally. And
excellent.
Best way to get a hold of me.
Well, you heard it here first, guys. There you have it, blessed babes. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode. And I would love if we could take a moment to send this week's subject, Dr. Rosmarin, some love, sweetness, and positivity as he continues to research and find ways for us to continue to embrace and find power in our emotions, particularly anxiety. If you're interested in being on the podcast, you guys know what to do by now. Send an email to podcast@zoegreco.com. Connect with me on Instagram, TikTok, and all socials at the Zoey Greco. And of course, I want to conclude by reminding you that you are important, you matter, and you are perfect exactly as you are. I love you. Your spirit guides love you. Dr. David Rosmarin loves you, and the universe loves you. So until next time, keep answering the call of your higher self. Bye, guys.